Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Schaerbeek in Belgium, and welcome to the final conference of the Make and Spend Matter Transfer Network. We're here to share and celebrate the activities of 7 cities over the course of the last 2.5 years around strategic public procurement. I'm Matthew Bakarisa-Jackson, and it's my pleasure and my honour to be moderating this conference today. Just before we start, 2 pieces of technical information. 1, the full conference is being recorded. So in the days following this conference, you will receive a link and you will be able to watch back the conference and listen back if, of course, you want to. And the second piece of technical information is the chat box is open for you to pose questions and comments as we progress through the morning. We may or may not get back to those questions during the course of the day, but we will write a briefing note afterwards in terms of those responses. Can I have the next slide, please? And the next one, please. Thank you. So, Make and Spend Matter is one of 23 transfer networks, which has been funded through the URBACT programme and also through the European Regional Development Fund. What we've been doing over the course of the last 2.5 years is to transfer the activities and the good practice of the city of Preston in the UK to 6 other cities. So why are we here today in Schaerbeek? We're here to be welcomed to this beautiful city. I've visited Schaerbeek twice, and I really enjoy the diversity of Schaerbeek, the economic and social potential of Schaerbeek, and of course, the parks and gardens. We're here to talk about why procurement and spend analysis is important. It's something that we do every day of our lives. We don't think about why we make our spending choices in particular ways. Make and Spend Matter has been about understanding where our procurement spend goes and the impact it has upon our places and upon our people. Third, we're here to celebrate the successes of the Make and Spend Matter partners. All our partners have done a fantastic job and have achieved far more than we anticipated at the outset of the network. We'd like to celebrate that success with our partners, and you will have the opportunity to hear from each of them through the course of the day. Fourth, we're here to launch the Make and Spend Matter Toolkit, which will be available at the link on the screen in the coming days. And that sets out a series of case studies, a series of frequently asked questions documents, the Make and Spend Matter tool and guide, and lots of other information around what we've been undertaking over the last 2.5 years. It will enable you, other cities, to utilise strategic procurement in a different way. We also want to debate the importance of strategic procurement into the future. This is not just about the 7 cities that participated in Make and Spend Matter. We want to change the culture of public procurement across Europe. We want to ensure that public procurement delivers wider economic, social, and environmental benefits. And lastly, we're here to share knowledge and learning from the process of transfer. This has been a really interesting opportunity for the City of Preston and our 6 partners to participate in. And we want to share that good practice transfer, it works, it's effective, it enables cities to learn and to develop their own practices. So that's enough from me for the moment. I would now like to introduce Madame Cécile Jodon, who is the acting mayor of Schaerbeek. We asked Cécile to pre-record a video which welcomed all our delegates to Schaerbeek this morning. Please can you play the video?
Mesdames et messieurs, vous tous qui des 4 coins de l'Europe êtes intéressés
Ladies and
par
gentlemen, you who are interested to the Making Spend Matter mechanism are welcome. We are happy to welcome you, so many of you, to this conclusion conference of Making Spend Matter. We would have hoped to welcome you here in this beautiful room, but unfortunately we have to adapt to the sanitary restriction conditions because of the COVID. We know that the public procurement systems are facing a series of challenges. This means using public money for the benefit of citizens, local businesses, and current and future generations. Through the work of the Making Spend Matter network, we are clearly demonstrating that cities can take concrete action at local level to address global issues. There have been many opportunities for exchange between the partner cities, first at transnational meetings and then online to adapt to the new health constraints. The practices put in place by the City of Preston and the sharing of examples of public procurement that have a positive impact on communities have encouraged the project partners to grow together. Over the past 2 years, all partner cities have been encouraged to adopt Preston's good practices according to their own needs. We, in fact, would like to thank the City of Preston and the experts who have accompanied the work of the network and who have played an essential role in framing the reflections of the partners. For Schaerbeek, this is reflected into our Sustainable Public Procurement Strategic Plan. It contains proposals for actions that will make it possible to strengthen the sustainability of our public contracts, right from the needs definition phase. Thanks to the work undertaken with the Making Spend Matter partners, the municipality of Schaerbeek can position itself as a responsible consumer. We are living in a period of crisis. Even if our cities have different economic and social realities, we are all convinced that public procurement is a key element in the economic recovery of our cities. Working on public procurement helps to strengthen good governance, ensuring transparency for all types of economic actors, especially small and medium-sized enterprises. The final goal remains the same, choosing the best product at the best price for our citizens. By networking European cities, building skills and capitalizing on good practices, funding programs such as URBACT support the work of public decision makers and stakeholders in the field to bring about sustainable solutions related to urban development. We are delighted to share with you the results of this work, which we hope will be useful for other cities that wish to follow this path. Thanking you again for your presence. I wish you an excellent conference and many successes for each of our cities. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Cecile, for the welcome to Schaerbeek. It's such a shame that we can't be with you in your beautiful city today. Making Spend Matter has operated within the framework of the URBACT programme, and I would now like to introduce Adele Brusella, who is the head of unit for programming and projects at URBACT, to tell us a little bit more about the transfer networks. Like Cecile, Adele has pre-recorded a video, and please can you play the video now? Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks so much for inviting me to come and say a short welcome to you this morning on behalf of the URBACT programme. Thank you also to the Mayor of Schaerbeek for hosting us all online. Sadly, it's very disappointing that we can't be there in your city to visit and see what you've been doing, and I do hope that we'll have other occasions to do so. I was asked to speak a little bit about the URBACT transfer networks and why it's important for cities to share their good practices. It seems quite obvious, really, doesn't it, that common sense, if you like, for cities to share their good ideas. And cities around Europe are facing very similar challenges, and there are so many excellent examples of small-scale, inexpensive ways of finding solutions. And cities needed a tool, actually, to help them to design a process for this transfer, and that's what URBACT did with these transfer networks. In 2017, we made a call for good practices, and 99 were identified and shared on the Good Practice website. This is still consulted now, actually, as a tool on the URBACT website. In 2018, we approved 23 transfer networks focusing on various topics from shrinking cities, integration of migrants, temporary land use, citizens' participation, and even things like nature-based solutions through bees, believe it or not. And this network was one of those 23 successful projects. And this range of topics demonstrates the richness of the solutions that exist across Europe. URBACT has worked with these cities to try and test this transfer methodology. And this has taken place through 3 main stages. So the first stage being how to understand and unpack the good practice to establish a clear and common understanding amongst all of the partners. The second phase is more around adapting the good practice through a transfer plan and considering how the practice would need to be adapted to local circumstances. And finally, the third stage in this method is about reuse. So how to start to test small implementation of some of the parts of this good practice. I don't have the time today to share with you all of the success stories from these networks, but maybe I can share with you some of the success factors. Maybe some of you are also thinking of starting out on a similar transfer journey. So what we learned was that this good practice process should be broken down into a sort of step-by-step, into sort of modules, if you like. And I think the Making Spend Matter network did that. And the external support of experts as critical friends is really important in this process, as is the strong leadership, both political and in terms of managing the process. Partners actually needed to work as in a stakeholder group, and this stakeholder group is really important in the process of transfer. We encourage cities essentially to be ambitious but realistic through this co-creation process in the stakeholder group. One of the other success factors is about identifying some quick wins, some small actions that can really motivate the local stakeholders and demonstrate the progress that's going to be tested and upscaled maybe later. And also to be creative, to try to tell the story of your transfer, demonstrate how it's having an impact locally. This can also help you to justify why you're spending local taxpayers' money on this journey of transfer. And finally, it's about taking risks and making mistakes. And actually, in many cases, these risks and these mistakes have been very valuable lessons for the cities involved in these networks. Many of these success factors have been seen in the Making Spend Matter network. And let me say that it's really amazing to see so many people online today for this event. When we first met Preston in their first project on public procurement in 2016, I think, I remember that there were lots of words like boring and bureaucratic that were frequently used. And now here we are several years later, seeing some real concrete results about showing how public procurement can have economic and social advantages in cities, and that's really great to see. The URBACT programme, with the support of Preston and Matthew, the lead expert, has designed an online course about strategic public procurement in 7 easy steps. These modules are being rolled out as we speak, and they also demonstrate using concrete case examples. So don't hesitate to come and join us if you can in some of those sessions. So let me conclude by saying that I'm really looking forward to spending the morning with you here, to hearing about the cities from the network and how they've progressed from when I met them many years ago now, actually, in the first part of the project. I'm also interested to hear about how public procurement can play a really important strategic role, especially now as part of the recovery from this COVID pandemic. So I wish you a very successful meeting, and I really look forward to speaking to you all online in the next few minutes. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Adele, and thank you for all the support that you've provided to Preston and to the networks that Preston has been involved in over the course of the last 5 years or 6 years now, I think. We're now ready to move on to talk about the story of Make and Spend Matter. So Adele outlined the framework of transfer networks that we've been working within. We now want to tell you a little bit more about what we've been doing and what we've achieved, more importantly, but also some of the challenges that we faced along this journey. I'm really pleased now to introduce Tamar Ray from Preston City Council, who has been the lead partner coordinator of Making Spend Matter, and is actually a friend as well as a colleague. Tamar, how are you today?
Good, thank you, Matthew. Yourself?
Oh, fantastic, fantastic. Can you start by telling us a little bit about what this good practice is about and why Preston started undertaking work around community wealth building?
Yes, of course. Good morning, everyone. It's a real pleasure to be here this morning and to be sharing the story of Making Spend Matter with you, starting with the good practice, which underpins everything we have done in the network. And essentially, the good practice is about 6 things. First and foremost, it is about procurement, obviously. Secondly, it's about a methodology, but it's also about cooperation and changing behaviour, and about cities and people and businesses. Next slide, please. It all began with community wealth building, which is seen as a different approach to economic development because it seeks to redirect wealth back into the local economy and place benefits into the hands of people and communities, a bottom-up approach rather than a top-down one. And we began this in 2011 in response to 3 things: a change in political leadership, the impact of the financial crisis and austerity, and the loss of a traditional inward investment project to the city. So community wealth building is based on 5 key principles: progressive procurement of goods and services, plural ownership of the economy, fair employment and just labour markets, making financial power work for local people and places, and the socially productive use of land and property. We decided to focus on procurement initially because it was very practical. After all organisations spend money buying goods and services.
Thank you. Thank you, Tamar. It's clear that the good practice is relatively long-term in its nature, and there's many different facets to community wealth building. Can you tell us a little bit about what Preston City Council and local stakeholders have done specifically around procurement over the course of the last 7 years?
Yes. Next slide, please. Unfortunately, the writing on this slide is very small, and I do apologise for that. But what it does do is it charts our procurement journey over the last 7 years, as Matthew mentioned. So we began working on procurement in 2013 because as a city council, we wanted to understand more about our procurement spend from a place-based perspective, not just ourselves, but other anchor institutions as well, because we recognise the impact will be greater if we work together. I should just explain that what we call anchor institutions are public organisations with a significant stake in place. They employ a lot of people, they have a lot of land and assets, and they spend a lot of money buying goods and services. We started with wanting to know more about our procurement spend, how much we were spending with suppliers based within the Preston municipality boundaries and the wider Lancashire region, for example. Also, how much we were spending in the various sectors and how much we were spending with small and medium-sized enterprises. So we commissioned CLES, the Centre for Local Economic Strategies based in Manchester in the UK, to undertake this analysis for us because they had experience in this area. We took the time frame of 2012-13 because that was the latest financial year for which the institutions had all the relevant information. We then repeated the process in 2017 for the period 2016-17, again with the support of CLES. and we undertook it a third time, this time in-house as part of the Make and Spend Matter activities. And this is where it gets really interesting. Over the 3 analyses, the data tells a particular story. It told us that at the start, spend within Preston municipality boundaries was lower than it should have been, even against national benchmarks. That since then, it has risen to 18% in 2016-17 and is now broadly stable. That spend in Lancashire increased significantly between the first and second analysis, but like the spend in the Preston boundaries, is now also broadly stable. The biggest change has been not the size of suppliers we do business with, but the number of suppliers who provide goods and services to us. This has shown the most dramatic increase and shows that we as public buyers have successfully changed the way we do things. And that is primarily down to seeking to engage with our business base better and to communicate better with said business base. What analysing our procurement spend shows is that concerns which are often raised about protectionism or being a zero-sum game are incorrect. For a start, we don't source everything we buy from within Preston or even Lancashire, as the market doesn't supply 100% of what we buy. And secondly, not all businesses based within these localities want to supply to us. What it also did is to get us to think about how we are spending it from an economic, social, and environmental point of view, and what opportunities procurement offers in relation to these benefits. This is something we will explore later in the plenary and also in the parallel sessions.
So Tamar, it's very clear that you've had lots of successes in Preston. Why would you want to share this with other cities? Why would you want to transfer the principles of the good practice to 6 other cities as part of a transfer network?
Yeah, so as Adele said, URBACT were looking to understand how good practices could be shared successfully. So when they opened a call for cities to submit potential good practices, we submitted a proposal and were successful. And this meant we could then apply to lead a transfer network. But like you said, how do you go about turning what is deemed to be a good practice into a transfer network? Apart from a successful application, of course. So first of all, you need some cities who are interested in becoming a transfer partner. So we put out a call for interested cities to complete a questionnaire about public procurement in their municipalities and why they wanted to take part in the transfer network. The challenge for us was to have the right mix of cities according to the URBACT rules, effectively 1 city per member state, and a mix of cities from more developed and less developed regions. Next slide, please. The cities we chose, having evaluated the responses to the questionnaires, were the ones that you see on this screen: Pamplona, Famalicão, Schaerbeek, Koszalin, Kavala, and Bystrica. Next slide, please. So once the partnership was in place, the big question was, how could we make this work? Preston had never done anything like this before. Sure, we talked to other cities about what we were doing in Preston around procurement and the wider community wealth building agenda, but we'd never transferred it in a formal way. So in September 2018, when we met in Preston as a partnership for the first time, we had 1 good practice, 7 cities, and 3 experts to support us. And the key, we realized, was keeping it simple. Taking the concept of transfer networks, understand, adapt, and reuse, we split the elements of the work into 2. A core transfer, the spend analysis methodology, which all partners would undertake, and an optional transfer, which allowed partners to pick different topics of interest to work on, such as how to better engage with SMEs, how to include social and environmental criteria, and how to explore spend analysis in more depth. And that's advanced spend analysis. And this would be done through 3 layers of activity. Learning all together, the transnational meetings, part of the core transfer, and learning from one another in smaller groups, the bilaterals, and the one-to-one support, that's bespoke support from the lead partner and lead expert. These were both part of the optional transfer. These activities were all brought together in a transferability study and each partner's individual transfer plan. Partners subsequently recorded their learning and transfer through transfer diaries and transfer and learning logs.
So Tamar, you talked there briefly about basic spend analysis, which has been the core component of the network. Can you tell us a little bit more about the core transfer and what exactly is basic spend analysis?
Yes, so as I just mentioned, the core transfer was part of the transfer which all partners would undertake. And it focused very much on the spend analysis methodology, which we shared with all partners at our first transnational meeting in February 2019. After that meeting, they went away and started to put the methodology into practice and reported back on their progress at subsequent transnational partner meetings. Next slide, please. So the spend analysis methodology focused on what we wanted to understand as cities. And it's quite simple, really. We wanted to understand how much we were spending, where we were spending it, the geography, and who we were spending it with in terms of business type and sectors. If you want to explore more about how you can do this yourself, you can find the tool for undertaking the analysis and the guide, which explains all the steps in more detail about the data that you need to collect and how you can put it then into the tool itself in step 2 of our Making Spend Matter toolkit using the web address on this slide. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Tamar. Can I have the next slide, please? So we're now going to start to hear from our partners, our 6 partners, who are going to talk in 2 different segments. We're firstly going to hear from Schaerbeek, Famalicão, and Bystrica, who are going to talk about why they got involved in this network, what they understood by basic spend analysis, and how they've adapted it in their cities. A little bit later on, we're then going to hear from Pamplona, Kavala, and Koszalin, who will talk about how they have reused the methodology and how they intend to reuse it moving into the future. I'd firstly like to introduce Valentina Morselli from the municipality of Schaerbeek. Valentina, how are you today?
Very good, thank you.
Very good. Valentina, tell us a little bit about your Making Spend Matter journey in Schaerbeek.
Yes, thank you, Matthew, for your questions, and good morning from Schaerbeek. So when we received the notification that Preston was looking for partners, our municipality was already working on 2 subjects that at the time did not seem really connected. On the first side, we were already improving our procurement procedure, especially for smaller tenders. And secondly, we were working on our sustainability through our municipal sustainable plan. When we received Preston's proposal, we suddenly realized that these 2 subjects work together, are indeed linked, and that working on procurement can be a strong leverage to tackle urban challenges. We also quickly realized that the core of the transfer practice is data. This, of course, is reasonable because data provide guidance to design effective policies, but reasonable does not mean easy. We had all the legal data on our procurement, but we had never analyzed it in a systematic manner. This proved to be a challenge at first, but once the method is in place, as Tamar explained, it becomes easier to replicate it in the following years. As you can see on the slide, the results of the spend analysis for 2017 and 2018 gave interesting results. Around 60% of the spending with the 300 biggest suppliers concern construction projects. This is not entirely surprising for us because Belgium's municipalities have responsibilities such as building infrastructures and schools. Also, between 4 to 11% of the analyzed data of the analyzed spend happened in Schaerbeek, around 50% in the Brussels capital region. The big difference in local spend is related to important construction projects, again proving how urban renewal is at the core of Schaerbeek's competencies. Also, it was interesting to see that most of our tenders are awarded to SMEs, and specifically between 24 to 35% with firms that have fewer than 50 employees. This brought us to another turning point in our Making Spend Matter journey. The realization that this had to be a team effort. 9 different departments cooperated to find and analyze the data, but also to work on how this data can affect our practice and how to link procurement and sustainability more stronger. Next slide, please. Preston encouraged us to adapt the methodology so that it could best respond to Schaerbeek's needs. We felt that if we wanted to make our procurement more sustainable, we had to define a long-term vision because practices and procedures cannot be changed overnight. We wanted to build on the data collected through the spend analysis. This means knowing who our suppliers are, where they are, but also to look at what we do buy, the objects of our tenders. As for the suppliers, data show that Schaerbeek's economic environment must be understood in relation with the Brussels region and the Belgian economy. Not only when it comes to production, but also concerning topics like unemployment policies and policies to encourage SMEs. Also, data show that we buy categories of goods and services where sustainability is a key component. This was shown through what is called the gap analysis. It allows to identify where we are now and the areas we want to improve on. For example, construction works lend to studying the material used, but also recycling procedures and reuse procedures. Buying uniforms lends to questions on work practices of the textile industry. Food in our school canteens relates to kids' health, but also organic produce and transport. So these are just examples on topics on which our teams are currently working, strengthening Schaerbeek's efforts to become a responsible consumer. Being part of the Making Spend Matter network encouraged us to think long-term and to define policy actions based on data. All of this is part of our Sustainable Procurement Strategic Plan that was adopted by the City Council earlier this month and which will be presented in the first parallel session. We are grateful to have had the opportunity to share this journey with Preston and with all our partner cities, and we look forward to hearing everybody's stories today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Valentina, and thank you for all your hard work over the course of the last 2.5 years. Schaerbeek has gone so much further than we ever anticipated in terms of your strategic procurement journey. So thanks very much. I'd now like to introduce Vitor Moreira from Famalicão. Vitor has pre-prepared a video and is going to talk about various things, but specifically the results of the spend analysis and whether they were as expected. Please can you play the video? Thank you.
O que significou para a sua cidade participar desta rede de transferência?
Para a Vila Nova de Famalicão, participar numa rede de transferência ou numa rede de partilha de conhecimentos não foi novidade, não era novidade. Quando nos apresentaram este tema, isso sim era alguma novidade, ainda por cima porque o tema da contratação pública não é propriamente um tema sexy, mas era um tema muito relevante do ponto de vista da capacitação das pessoas para podermos responder mais eficazmente a todas as necessidades do município.
O que achou quando viu a metodologia? Ou seja, era o que esperava?
Quando fomos confrontados com a metodologia, íamos de mente aberta e, portanto, não esperávamos nada de especial, queríamos perceber o que é que poderíamos aprender. Depois, quando começámos a perceber um pouco mais, foi difícil perceber ao início a metodologia, até porque esta questão da contratação pública passa por todas as pessoas acharem que já sabem tudo sobre contratação. Todas as pessoas acharem que já sabem como é que nós compramos e a quem compramos. O que é que há a aprender mais sobre os dados sobre a contratação? Esta era a principal dificuldade. Depois de percebermos a metodologia, o que é que queríamos aprofundar mais, foi fácil de perceber o que devíamos fazer e o que é que devíamos mudar para adaptarmos a nossa necessidade à metodologia.
Que obstáculos acha que enfrentaria ao colocá-lo em prática?
Ao colocar em prática a metodologia, deparámos com o principal obstáculo, que era o facto de não termos a nossa estrutura preparada para responder às perguntas que afinal este projeto nos ia colocar de novo. Como eu disse anteriormente, nós na contratação pública achamos que já sabemos tudo sobre contratação. Na verdade, quando começámos a implementar a metodologia, fomos deparando com novas perguntas às quais tínhamos que dar novas respostas. E esse foi o principal obstáculo, prepararmos a nossa estrutura para responder a estas novas respostas. Por outro lado, um outro obstáculo que fomos ultrapassando, sempre com alguma dificuldade, é essa mudança requer ajuda de outros atores locais, ajuda de outras pessoas dentro do próprio município. E esse obstáculo era o principal. Conseguimos pôr toda a gente a trabalhar para o mesmo fim, que era conhecer melhor a contratação pública para podermos utilizar a contratação pública melhor para o futuro das compras públicas em Famalicão.
Como é que adotou a metodologia?
Como referi anteriormente, nós começamos por trabalhar as bases de dados existentes e, trabalhando essas bases de dados, adaptá-las à nova realidade, àquilo que nós precisávamos. Também foi muito importante, nesta metodologia, começar a preparar a segunda fase. Nós estamos a falar da primeira fase, que era da análise base da contratação, e começar a preparar a segunda fase também era importante. Criar os ficheiros, as bases de dados necessárias para responder à segunda fase. Na segunda fase, e começar também a preparar a nossa articulação, para além da articulação interna, começar a preparar uma articulação externa, nomeadamente com os nossos fornecedores. A criação de uma newsletter foi fundamental para esta fluidez de informação e de caminho que queríamos fazer.
Os resultados foram os esperados?
Como dissemos anteriormente, nós tínhamos entrado no projeto de mente aberta, portanto não sabíamos muito bem que resultados esperar. De um certo ponto de vista, os resultados foram esperados. Nós conseguimos perceber que em Famalicão cerca de 40% das compras são gastas na economia local. Este número para nós era um número interessante, e é um número interessante, mas faltava-nos perceber como é que era noutros municípios. Quando trabalhamos com outros municípios, e estamos a tentar passar a boa prática, e já trabalhamos com outros municípios, conseguimos perceber que nós temos uma taxa de compra na economia local maior do que outros municípios em Portugal, para já nos estudados. O que nos põe aqui uma dificuldade, ou melhor, uma dúvida sobre o processo. Nós achávamos que o nosso resultado era bom, hoje estamos a ver que ele é bom, falta-nos saber se o resultado decorre da ação do município junto da sua economia local, ou se o próprio território, o concelho, o facto de ter muitas empresas ou poucas empresas, condiciona a nossa forma de comprar. E, portanto, este é o nosso grande dilema, perceber agora bem o resultado final. Mas aquilo que nós conseguimos obter resultado até agora é bastante satisfatório e, portanto, foi, digamos que, o esperado, aquilo que fomos esperando ao longo do desenvolvimento do projeto.
Muito obrigada pela disponibilidade.
Thank you very much, Vitor and colleagues in Famalicão. Again, great job in not only transferring the good practice from Preston, but also transferring the methodology to other cities in Portugal as well. So thanks ever so much. Finally, in this segment, I'd like to introduce Christina Goodridge from Bystrica. Good morning, Christina. How are you?
Good morning, everybody, from a very sunny Bystrica.
Oh, lucky you, Christina. Lucky you. What barriers did you think you might face with the spend analysis methodology and the process at the outset of this network?
Well, for Bystrica municipality, which is a medium-sized city in the region of Transylvania in Romania, being part of the transfer network making spend matter was a challenge. In the first place, because we had a lot of experience with the action planning networks within URBACT, but never have been part of a transfer network before. Then, the second challenge we had to tackle was the project itself, because its subject was not something that here in Bystrica and also in Romania are very familiar with. And personally, me as project manager, I only knew the little details that I'm dealing with when I'm working within projects and in the regular office activities, but not the whole framework. I was not aware of the different legal constraints. I didn't know what the difference were in approaching public procurement processes in the partner countries. Learning about it made us realize that, on one hand, we were not alone in tackling this sensitive subject, and on the other hand, got us frustrated because we felt we could do more. However, there was a real willingness to understand procurement spend in more detail through spend analysis amongst the municipality of Bistrița and the project team. And this is the reason why we wanted to be a part of the Making Spend Matter network. Initially, we thought that the methodology provided by the lead partner was going to be very easy to transfer because they had a lot of experience and were very eager to share it with the other project partners. But in practice, we discovered that it wasn't that easy to apply the findings locally to our municipality because we had some barriers. Next slide, please. The barriers consisted mostly of the legal aspects of our national framework because they are very different from our lead partners. And although we were very excited in the beginning to know that there are things that can be included within procurement processes, we discovered that in the end we couldn't because our law didn't permit it. We learned about including the social and environmental criteria in a tender, and then explaining to our colleagues about it, they replied that this will not happen very soon in Romania because according to the current legislation, including such things in a tender is considered bias. Thus, we decided that we have to take it step by step and try to change behaviors and mentality first. And then, hopefully, we will get to the bigger issues like legislation, and maybe in some years, following our experience in this project, we will be able to change the law as well. The way we transferred the methodology locally was working with the project team. One of my colleagues, who is more experienced with the procurement processes, explained that we have a national platform where public procurement is made and where we can find all the procurement that is made within our institution. In this platform, we could apply some filters and then we were able to extract what we needed in order to make our own spend analysis. And now we have our reports and findings within spend analysis that we can share with other public institutions. This is easier to do here rather than to involve small and medium enterprises because the public institutions are mandatory to have their public procurement made through this platform, but for the private sector, this is not mandatory. Although at this point, we focused on transferring our knowledge with public institutions, somehow related to the municipality, we are hoping to transfer it to the private sector as well, using some of our local group connections with the business sector, like the Chamber of Commerce and Industry. We will be able to make it happen. As a public authority, every piece of money counts, as it is the contribution of every citizen, and we hope to be the best transfer model, so we truly feel like making spend matter. Thank you.
Thanks, Christina. It's really great to see how much progress you've made in Bistrița, despite the challenges that you faced. And it's really good to see and hear how you're wanting to take it forward after the end of Making Spend Matter. So now we're going to take a few minutes to introduce the optional transfer, which, as I mentioned earlier, was a series of activities which our cities could undertake depending on their context. We've always been really keen to stress the spend analysis results in and of themselves are not the whole story. It's how you use those results to look at how you can improve your processes and practices that is the important part. So the remainder of the transfer methodology focuses on what happens after spend analysis, something we also explored in our other transnational meetings, and the learning from the optional transfer covering the topics outlined on the slide here. I'd like to hand over now to Matthew Bakarisa-Jackson, who will introduce the topic of advanced spend analysis. He will then pass over to Emma Clarence and John Watt, who were ad hoc experts for our network for SME engagement and social and environmental criteria. Thank you, Matthew.
Thanks a lot, Tamar. Can I have the next slide, please? So the first aspect of optional transfer that we looked at was around advanced spend analysis. As Tamar has already explained, basic spend analysis enables cities to understand where their money goes geographically, sectorally, and in business type terms, such as spend with small to medium-sized enterprises, for example. Advanced spend analysis enables cities to collect further data and further evidence to inform their procurement policies and practices, but also to enable them to understand their impact in a little bit more depth. There are three different types of advanced spend analysis, and we will talk more about this in the parallel sessions later. The first is gap analysis, which enables cities to understand which contracts they could potentially spend in a different way, whether that be through a different organization, such as a social enterprise or a cooperative, for example, or to identify contracts where there's an opportunity to include social and environmental considerations. The second aspect of advanced spend analysis is called respend analysis. This enables cities to understand what happens to their procurement spend once it reaches their suppliers. What do they do with it? Who are their suppliers? Where are their suppliers based? Who are their employees? And where do their employees live? It gives a greater understanding of the impact of procurement spend. And lastly, wider impact analysis enables cities to gather data about the impact procurement is having upon other issues. It enables cities to create, to gather data as to the extent to which procurement is contributing to the creation of jobs, for example. It enables cities to understand the extent to which procurement is contributing to reductions in carbon emissions, for example. It enables cities to understand how procurement is contributing to improving the skills of the population. So those, in a very brief summary, are the three different types of advanced spend analysis that we explored as part of the optional transfer with our partners. I'd now like to pass to Emma Clarence, who is an expert in SME engagement and SME procurement. Emma, do you want to tell us a little bit about what we did around SME engagement? Thank you.
Thanks very much, Matt, for the introduction. We know that small and medium-sized enterprises are very much the backbone of our local and our national economies. They make up the majority of businesses, and of course, the majority of jobs are in SMEs. And yet when it comes to public procurement, they're actually much more marginalised than you would anticipate, given the contribution they make economically. And that's before we actually take into account their ability to innovate and to make wider contributions to addressing social, environmental, and economic challenges. There are lots of different reasons why SMEs don't participate in public procurement opportunities. And there are going to be many valid reasons why they continue not to do so. But I think we should always remember that non-engagement by SMEs should be a choice rather than because of a procurement system that actively precludes and dissuades them from engaging in public procurement opportunities. Next slide, please. What is clear is that in order to build a conducive environment to engaging SMEs in public procurement, there needs to be a multifaceted approach. It's necessary to support both local administrations and SMEs to develop the procurement skills and capacity to facilitate SME engagement. It means simplifying procurement processes. It means improving the way in which local administrations and SMEs communicate with each other. It means ensuring that documentation is clear and easy to understand. And it's about providing opportunities for SMEs to learn and develop their understanding of what public procurement means and the requirements that are associated with it. This part of the Making Spend Matter story has supported cities to examine both their own ways of working and how an ecosystem that does not place barriers for SME engagement can be created. The parallel session is actually going to explore this in more detail and more depth, as well as the role of anchor institutions and the relationships with anchor institutions and the role they play. I now want to introduce John Watt, an ad hoc expert providing support to cities in the use of social and environmental criteria in procurement.
Thank you, Emma, and good morning, everyone. Making Spend Matter gave the cities momentum and the chance to really start, or in some cases advance, the inclusion of social and environmental criteria in their procurement. Through the meetings and workshops, we worked together on 3 main elements for applying sustainability into procurement. The first was strategic planning for sustainable procurement. So we asked the cities what sustainable outcomes they wanted to achieve, what sustainable policies or plans already in place could link to procurement and give more momentum for procurement, and what are the current conditions for sustainable procurement in the city. The second area we explored were the practical processes. So that was everything from needs assessment with their colleagues and users of services, to market dialogue with suppliers and SMEs, all the way through to the actual sustainable options for criteria, for specifications, and for contract conditions. The third element was contract monitoring and management. So we wanted to ensure that the social outcomes that Making Spend Matter was aiming to achieve were being considered in the procurement, and particularly in the follow-ups and the outcomes that the suppliers were potentially offering in those different contracts. Next slide, please. In addition to the actual learning that we did in the workshops and the meetings, we also gave the cities their homework. So we asked them in between those sessions and across the whole of the project to try and apply that learning. And they did. For example, Schaerbeek has been designing a sustainable procurement plan and working on this throughout the project. Cushalen has been including social and environmental criteria in various procurements where possible, and are also working on their own plan. You'll also be able to hear in the breakout session and in some of the presentations coming up, the really great work of Pamplona and Kavala in really pushing themselves and pushing their regional and even national levels of social and environmental criteria as well. So across the work that we did in Making Spend Matter, we've really laid the foundations in some of the cities for starting or improving their sustainable procurement in each case. And we're looking forward to seeing how they can take this forward after the project ends. Back to you, Matt.
Great, thank you, John. John, Emma, it's been a real pleasure to work with you and to collaborate on this project, and thanks for all your support and help over the course of the last 2.5 years. We're going to now move to our second segment of partners, Pamplona, Kavala, and Cushalen, who are going to talk a little bit more about their results of their spend analysis and how they have adapted and reused the methodology that we talked about a little bit earlier. First, I'd like to introduce Jose Costero. Jose from Pamplona. Morning, Jose, how are you?
Good morning. I'm very happy to be here at the final conference of Making Spend Matter.
That's good. Can you tell us a little bit about your results and how you've used these to begin to change procurement processes and practices in Pamplona, please? Thank you, Jose.
Yes, of course. Good morning, everyone. The spend analysis of Pamplona was undertaken over a 4-year period and took into account about 3,000 different contracts that represent more than 300 million euros of total spend. The main results of this analysis has been the following. First, 55% of spend was with businesses based in the Pamplona metropolitan area. Second, 50% of spend in 2018 was with SMEs. And third, 7% of spend is with social economy organizations. After making this basic analysis, some questions arose around interpretation of these results. Are these figures the same for every kind of contract and sector? What will happen if we apply the analysis only to minor contracts that are directly awarded? How could we get greater outcomes with few efforts in changing procurement? So a deeper analysis was undertaken to try answering to these questions, analyzing only minor contracts, those that are awarded without a tendering process. We found that 66% of spend in minor contracts was with micro SMEs, much more than the 15% of total spend if we consider all contracts. Surprisingly, the geographical analysis of minor contracts was very similar to total spend. Other interesting finding was that spend with social economy organizations increased to 15% if we consider only minor contracts. In second place, we analyzed the biggest contracts, and we found that the 18 providers with the highest spend represent more than 50% of total, with only 30 contracts. This means a big opportunity to change procurement acting only on a few contracts. As part of making spend matter, Pamplona also transferred the spend analysis methodology to two key anchor institutions, the Public University of Navarra and the Regional Government of Navarra. The results of the Public University were very similar to those of the City Council. However, the results of the regional government were slightly different, with 55% of total spend with businesses outside the region and 65% of total spend with SMEs, both higher than the figures of the City Council. Next slide, please. Pamplona is developing since 2018 a strategic plan in the framework of the urban agenda, fully aligned with Agenda 2030 and SDGs. It is called the Strategy 2030, and it includes a vision of the city in the long term with 5 strategic dimensions and 29 strategic goals. One of these 5 strategic dimensions is called Innovative and Integral Public Management, and it states that the City Council must be the engine of the city transformation, and to get that we need to make public management in a more innovative way. This includes, of course, the way in which public procurement is made. Besides, in April 2019, the municipality of Pamplona approved an instruction on a strategic and socially responsible public procurement, which was accompanied by a guide that put social clauses, verification mechanisms, and impact measurement tools at the heart of the procurement practice. Regarding the plans for the future in Pamplona City Council, they start with the creation of a specific unit of procurement, as today this is managed individually in each of the 12 different municipal departments. This will help to deal with procurement with a more strategic approach. In addition, as part of the Strategy 2030, there is a project to try to change the organizational culture within the municipality to work in a more innovative and integral way. In this sense, spend analysis methodology is seen internally as a useful tool to monitor the progress in the procurement processes improvement. Finally, the plans of the municipality of Pamplona are to continue transferring the methodology to other anchor institutions and municipalities from our region and beyond. Thank you very much.
Jose, thanks so much. I really like the way that you've transferred the spend analysis methodology to other anchor institutions as well. That's really great, and that was an objective of the network at the start. I would now like to introduce Yanis Chatsikonstantinou from Kavala. Yanis has pre-recorded a video, and we'll talk about how Kavala has used the network to adapt their procurement processes. Please can we play Yanis's video? Thank you.
Ποια ήταν τα αποτελέσματα της ανάλυσης δαπανών για το Δήμο Καβάλας?
Η καλή πρακτική του Πρέσον άλλαξε τον τρόπο σκέψης του πολιτικού και υπηρεσιακού προσωπικού του Δήμου σχετικά με τις δημόσιες συμβάσεις. Οι προμήθειες δεν είναι μία απλή παραγγελία για την ικανοποίηση των αναγκών του οργανισμού, αλλά κάτι περισσότερο. Είναι στρατηγική, οικονομία, δικαιοσύνη, κοινωνική αξία, περιβάλλον, υγεία. Βασικός παράγοντας του στρατηγικού σχεδίου είναι η ανάγκη συνεργασίας με την αγορά για την από κοινού ανάληψη πολιτικών και πρακτικών προς όφελος της τοπικής ανάπτυξης. Οι επιχειρήσεις θα παράσχουν αγαθά και υπηρεσίες με υψηλή προστιθέμενη αξία, συμβάλλοντας έτσι στη μείωση των οικονομικών διαρροών από την Καβάλα προς την υπόλοιπη Ελλάδα, ενισχύοντας την βιώσιμη ανάπτυξη και τη μετάβαση στην πράσινη οικονομία. Το Make Spend Matter άλλαξε και τις προσωπικές μας τάσεις. Είμαστε πλέον πιο αισιόδοξοι, πιο πρόθυμοι στο να συμπεριλάβουμε κοινωνικά και περιβαλλοντικά κριτήρια στις προμήθειες. Είμαστε ευτυχείς που συνεργαζόμαστε με επιχειρήσεις και οργανισμούς πριν ξεκινήσει μία προμήθεια. Είμαστε χαρούμενοι που συνεργαζόμαστε με συνεργάτες άλλων ευρωπαϊκών πόλεων.
Πώς η γνώση αυτή άλλαξε τον τρόπο με τον οποίο διαχειριζόμαστε τις προμήθειες σαν Δήμος?
Η ανάλυση δαπανών λειτουργήσε ως εργαλείο μέτρησης και παρακολούθησης αποτελεσμάτων των δημοσίων συμβάσεων. Ακολουθώντας τη μεθοδολογία ανάλυσης δαπανών της πόλης του Πρέστον, διαπιστώσαμε ότι από τα 9 εκατομμύρια που δαπανήθηκαν σε προμήθειες το έτος 2018, πέρασε στην τοπική οικονομία το 50%, ενώ το οικονομικό όφελος από το προσωπικό και την αλυσίδα εφοδιασμού των προμηθευτών ήταν 2 εκατομμύρια. Με βάση τα αποδεικτικά στοιχεία της ανάλυσης δαπανών, προσαρμόσαμε τις διαδικασίες και πρακτικές των προμηθειών μας για να αξιοποιήσουμε πιο αποτελεσματικά τις δαπάνες. Φροντίσαμε να γίνουν όλες οι επιχειρησιακές αλλαγές που απαιτούνται για την αποτελεσματικότερη συνεργασία με τις μικρομεσαίες επιχειρήσεις στην διαδικασία των δημοσίων συμβάσεων. Συμπεριλάβαμε μία σειρά ατόμων, τμήματων και ευρύτερων ενδιαφερομένων στη διαδικασία. Οργανώσαμε συζητήσεις με ανθρώπους της αγοράς προκειμένου να πειραματιστούμε με τις απόψεις τους σχετικά με τις δαπάνες και συμμετείχαμε σε εκδηλώσεις τοπικών επιχειρήσεων. Πλέον οι προμηθευτές έχουν άμεση επαφή και πληροφόρηση για τις δημόσιες συμβάσεις και τους παρέχεται επιμόρφωση και τεχνική βοήθεια κατά το στάδιο υποβολής προσφορών. Πλέον γνωρίζουμε τις επιχειρήσεις που μπορούν να προσφέρουν επιτυχίες για μια καλύτερη οικονομία στην Καβάλα.
Ποια ήταν τα 2 βασικά μαθήματα που πήραμε από τη διαδικασία?
Ένα από τα βασικά σημεία εκμάθησης ήταν το να μάθουμε την έννοια και τα πλαίσια κοινωνικής αξίας. Αυτός ήταν ένας νέος όρος για εμάς, ήμασταν όμως πρόθυμοι να το μάθουμε και να το εφαρμόσουμε στη διάρκεια του κύκλου προμηθειών. Δεύτερο βασικό σημείο εκμάθησης ήταν τα εργαλεία ανάλυσης δαπανών, τα οποία λειτουργήσαν αποτελεσματικά και μας βοήθησαν στο να υπολογίζουμε το πού πάνε τα έξοδα και ποιο είναι το οικονομικό όφελος για την πόλη.
Τι έχουμε επενδύσει στη γνώση αυτή από τη διαδικασία?
Επενδύουμε σε ένα στρατηγικό σχέδιο προκειμένου να προσεγγίσουμε την κοινωνική αξία των προμηθειών και να χρησιμοποιήσουμε τις συμβάσεις για την αντιμετώπιση ευρύτερων προκλήσεων. Οι προμήθειες πρέπει να αποκτήσουν ένα σαφή πράσινο προσανατολισμό με δεσμευτικό στόχο δαπανών επί του συνόλου των συμβάσεων. Η Καβάλα θέλει να ενσωματώσει κοινωνικά και περιβαλλοντικά κριτήρια στις προμήθειες και αυτό έγινε για πρώτη φορά με την προμήθεια των υλικών καθαριότητας. Ο προϋπολογισμός του 2021 θα παράγει κοινωνικά αγαθά που προάγουν την δημόσια υγεία, την κοινωνική συνοχή και την κλιματική ασφάλεια. Είμαστε αισιόδοξοι για την επιτυχία των στόχων που θέτουμε και θεωρούμε πως εκφράζουν τις ανάγκες των πολιτών της Καβάλας.
Τι θα συμβουλεύαμε σε μια πόλη που θέλει να υιοθετήσει το σχέδιο της Καβάλας?
Υπάρχουν προγράμματα, εργαλεία μάθησης και καλές πρακτικές που μπορούν να αλλάξουν τις προσωπικές μας τάσεις, να μας κάνουν πιο αισιόδοξους και πιο πρόθυμους στο να ανασχεδιάσουμε τις διαδικασίες προς όφελος της βιώσιμης ανάπτυξης. Αυτή τη δυνατότητα δίνει και το πρόγραμμα URBACT, το οποίο στοχεύει στην ενδυνάμωση της βιώσιμης ολοκληρωμένης αστικής ανάπτυξης των ευρωπαϊκών πόλεων. Το Making Spend Matter μας έδωσε νέες εμπειρίες και βελτίωσε τις ατομικές, πρακτικές και γλωσσικές μας ικανότητες. Επίσης, μας βοήθησε στη μεταφορά της ανάλυσης δαπανών, γνώσης και μάθησης και στα άλλα ιδρύματα του Δήμου και στον εμπορικό οργανισμό. Το Make Spend Matter αποτελεί μια καλή ευκαιρία για τις πόλεις που θέλουν να μάθουν από τις πρακτικές άλλων πόλεων και ειδικότερα για τις ομοιότητες και διαφορές που σχετίζονται με τις διαφορετικές ερμηνείες του Ευρωπαϊκού Κανονισμού Προμηθειών με την Εθνική Νομοθεσία.
Yanis and Io, thank you so much for producing the video. Again, great work that's been undertaken in Kavala, which is now being shared across wider Greece. And now we'll move to our last but not least partner, Adam Saviki from Koszalin. Adam is an old friend of Preston. He was involved in the Procure network as well. Adam, how are you?
I'm fine, Matt. Thank you. And you?
Great, good. Can you tell me a little bit about how you've engaged other anchor institutions as part of the Make and Spend Matter project? Thank you, Adam.
Yeah, thank you, Matt. Before I will say about engaging other anchor institutions, I would like to say a bit about our discoveries within the framework of Making Spend Matter network. Owing to the participation, we have discovered that indeed local public procurement market is very big, worth over 120 million per annum euros, obviously, but still a very small number of local SMEs participate in it. We were, for instance, very surprised to discover that as much as 23% of the city council's expenditure goes to local Koszalin SMEs and those that are based in Koszalin functional area. We were, however, not surprised of the number of over 91% of our spend going to small and medium enterprises. It's no wonder, because whole EU's economy is based on them. But our spend analysis was not only numbers. We've gained extensive knowledge about local procurement market, its mechanisms, and our needs. For instance, we investigated some tendencies that more specialized and more large-scale procurement means less money is retained on local level. We know the gaps, that is, sectors in which our business base is, cannot be supplier, cannot provide goods or services, or is not competitive enough. We also know that we need to strengthen competences of our business base in order to bid successfully in tenders. We've also shown that we need to explore further how to include non-price criteria in tenders for the sake of local economy, society, and environment. And now I would like to say to and answer your main question that we believe that one of our successes was transfer of the good practice to other anchor institutions. We cooperated with two of them, Regional Hospital and Technical University of Koszalin. But there were key differences in the results they achieved, showing how much procurement can differ. For instance, for Koszalin Technical University of Koszalin, only 50% went to local and Koszalin functional area enterprises. And for Regional Hospital, the situation was even worse, because about 11% of their spend went to local level. That all was mainly due to very specialized procurement. Next slide, please. Could you please, next slide? Oh yes, thank you. All that knowledge and experience enabled us to plan for the future. First of all, we would like to improve the way the data is collected. We would like to further investigate in more detail the gaps. And also we would like to automatize and customize a bit the process of data collecting, because right now it is a bit human resources and time consuming. But what is more important, we would like implement spend analysis and all the accompanying actions as regular cities policy linked to wider social and economic goals. It is so because we would like to provide for SMEs a new impulse for growth that would translate into an increased number of jobs, better wages. We would like to address local challenges and improve living standards of the residents of Koszalin in order to limit migration, especially younger people, to other cities. And in the end, we intend to build a more inclusive, sustainable, and resilient economy. There are two key lessons we would like to share with others. So, first of all the key stakeholders must be involved. And the second one is that SMEs are willing to engage when showed local good examples and offered some guidance and assistance. Thank you very much.
Adam, thanks so much for all your work over the last 6 years, really, around progressing your strategic procurement activities. Now, Make and Spend Matter isn't just about the 6 partner cities. It's also about improving the good practice itself. And we've spent a lot of time trying to improve the good practice of the city of Preston. Tamar, can you tell us a little bit more about what you've done to improve that good practice?
Yes, certainly, Matthew. So very briefly, because I am aware that we are starting to run out of time, one of the first things that we did was to look to undertake the spend analysis ourselves, both the Preston and the anchor institutions. And the point of this was to build our capacity and to create ownership of the findings. Once we'd done this, we shared the findings internally and collectively with the anchors. We also looked at ways we could improve communication with businesses, which is something that I'll go into in more detail in the parallel session which follows on anchor institution and SME engagement. Within Preston Council itself, we have begun to develop a social value procurement framework, which links our corporate priorities and procurement. And we've worked on developing an action plan for ongoing activities once Make and Spend Matter formally finishes at the beginning of June. So that in a nutshell is where we are at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you, Tamar. I'm sure there'll be more opportunity to talk about those activities in the parallel session. I just want to say a few concluding words at the end of this first session of the Make and Spend Matter final conference. What we've tried to do there is to tell you the story of Make and Spend Matter. We've tried to tell you what the good practice is about. We've explained the basic spend analysis methodology. We've introduced some of the concepts around advanced spend analysis, SME engagement, and social and environmental considerations. And we've heard from each of our fantastic partners about the journey that they've been on and the changes that they've made in terms of adopting and adapting and reusing the spend analysis methodology. We're now ready to move to our parallel sessions, which are going to start at a slightly later time of 11:05 CET. And there's going to be 3 parallel sessions, and you should have all received a Zoom link as part of the email on the 19th of March. But for those of you that are attending the parallel session 2 on anchor institutions and SME engagement, please use the Zoom link update that was sent on the 23rd of March, so yesterday. We're going to have 3 sessions. The first one is going to be with me, and it's going to be with the cities of Famalicão and Schaerbeek, and we're going to talk about advanced spend analysis, strategic procurement plans, and social value procurement framework, something that's a little bit new and that we haven't mentioned as part of the conversation so far. With Emma, Clarence, our ad hoc expert, Preston, Bistritza, and Koszalin are going to talk about anchor and SME engagement. And then with John Watt, our ad hoc expert, they're going to, Pamplona and Kavala are going to talk about social environmental criteria. So the instructions for joining those sessions you should have received by email, and we will start at 11:05 CET. Now, I'd just like to say a final thank you to all the partners for their contributions to this first session. We hope as our delegates that you've enjoyed that and that you have now a much better understanding of Make and Spend Matter, the good practice of the City of Preston, and what we've been up to over the course of the last 2.5 years. Thank you very much, and see you at 11:05 CET. Bye for now, and see you shortly.